Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So we have with us a couple of people who've been out on long-term reconnaissance assignments. First up, Tracy Baggiano.
Hello.
How you doing,
I'm
Tracy?
back from my stinky assignments. I'm doing good.
Hey, TG and Anders, it's time to wake up. There are ways to wake up. If you find them, please let me know. Would appreciate. And still on secret remote assignment, but it's all right. She's using a burner phone to log in. Mala Mahadevan. How you doing, Mala?
I am doing fine. Thank you, Kevin. I'm glad to be back.
Okay, so we've got a couple of announcements for tonight. The first announcement is TriPass board elections. And for this, I'm going to use all of the power available to me vested in the state of Nevada and share my screen. And show this thing. Look at that. This
Recount.
TriPass board elections, where Tracy is positive that our Saddam Hussein-like vote of 24-0 was rigged.
Recount.
Tracy forgets that she is up for election next year.
Well, we can determine a recount next year too. You never know.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. We could do.
Somebody
So-
still may be asking for a recount next year that we know of.
So it is officially closed on December 3rd. Board of directors will be basically the same as next year. I'm the president still. Rick Pack is vice president of marketing. Mala is still the treasurer. Next year, we'll have the other two positions open. And we'll talk about that in a year when it's okay to think about elections again. Second topic, one that's more fun. TriPass survey.
Yes.
If you have not yet filled out the TriPass survey, we would appreciate it if you do. This is a short survey, 7 questions, and is all about the direction of our organization. Looking at the questions of, say, what types of special interest groups do you want to see, how often per month to meet, and topics along these lines. We tend to have a survey once every couple of years so that I can get an idea of the pulse of the organization and can dutifully ignore it. But this year, very interested in your thoughts. So if you could take a few minutes, fill that out, I would absolutely appreciate it. We have some people who've already responded, and thank you to everyone who has. And for people who are future respondents, thank you in advance. All right, I am done sharing my screen. So I'm going to push this button to stop sharing. Boom, we're back to normal. All right, next topic of interest. A couple of people reached out regarding jobs on each side of the fence. So if you are looking for a job, Michael Moen is in the area here. He's hiring or looking for employees for an insurance company that's in the Triangle area, Raleigh-Durham area. It's actually closer to Durham than Raleigh. It is insurance background, intermediate DBA, ideally some analytics background. So if you're interested in that position, hit me up. So message me on Meetup, hit me up on LinkedIn, however you can find me. And I will put you in touch with Michael to get more information about the position. Meanwhile, one of the members of our group, currently she's out in Tennessee, is looking for a position ideally in the warehousing and BI space. So if you are hiring, you're hiring people for BI expertise, again, hit me up. I'll put you in touch with Elaine. That was my announcements for tonight. Brief statement on Shop Talk. Shop Talk is a community-driven weekly broadcast where we talk about basically questions and answers in chat, as well as topics, and how quickly we can goad one of us, typically me, into a rant. I would love to see Tracy do a rant one of these days. We just have to find the right topic. Chat, if you can find the right topic, you got a rant from Tracy.
He'll pay you to find the right topic.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm a very cheap
It might only
man.
be $1, but he would pay you.
I am
It might
probably...
only be $1, but he'll pay you.
I can rant about PASS if you like for an entire hour. I'm not sure anybody wants to listen, but I can go on.
Right now, the I think that train wrecks are always interesting to audiences. And I hate even joking about that.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
That's a medium motion
It's a
train
fair
wreck.
analogy, or the Titanic in slow motion is what I call it.
Yeah. Andrew says passes off limits for tonight.
I don't even care to watch it.
I'm okay with that rule, Anders. Passes off limits for tonight. So
Yay,
let's talk
Anders.
about
Fair
let's
enough.
talk about other stuff.
Fair enough, and that's
Good rule, Anders.
You do know there's a difference between a rant and a rave, bad versus good. Yes, and who says we ever say good things here?
Good point.
Yep. I save my rants for things I dislike. Speaking of which, have I ranted about Azure Data Studio notebooks lately? Because I'm wearing the t-shirt, but I don't. The notebooks need additional love. I think they're going to get it. So long term, I think they'll be fine. Short term, every time I use them, I just think I could do this. So I have so much Jupyter Notebooks muscle memory that I want those shortcuts. I want that functionality to behave like it does in the base product.
Just
You know
be
what
happy
grinds
about
Kevin's
it.
gears?
Use that tool.
Notebooks. Actually, no, I love notebooks. I really like them as a tool. It's just I like the more mature interface from Jupyter Notebooks. Aren't they just Jupyter in disguise? Yes, but it's a different display engine. It's a different rendering engine, and it's as a result, they're going to have their own set of shortcuts, and they're missing a lot of the shortcuts around things like run cell, the command mode stuff, delete cell, add cell, cut cell, move cell, and you have to use the mouse for everything. So you can still do it, but you're using the mouse for everything. Get me started on NoSQL. I'm going to try not to do that tonight. We need access notebooks. You know, Anders, you joke, but I'm pretty sure that you might be able to do that. At least in Python, you might be able to access. I need to look that up. So, yeah, access is going to be a tough one to look up because the term access is just too general. I'm a prod DBA. I don't joke. I don't believe that about production DBAs. You can use a SQL Server and then use external tables via ODBC and get to access. Yeah, that's an option.
You can use a link server and get the access.
You can use a link server to get to access, yes. I mean, you can do a lot of evil in this world, yes.
But you can do that all the way back to at least 2000. I think they had link servers in 6.5, so you could get access all this time.
Access forms in notebooks. That you're not going to get. That would have been the UI side. You could get the data side, but no UI side. So, since we're talking about notebooks, today was day one of my post-con training for Data Platform Summit, and it was all notebooks. Like that was 100%. It's 100% Azure Data Studio notebooks mixed between SQL Server and Python. So I've had enough experience lately building up notebooks in the product, and still just give me the shortcuts. That would I know, I understand, intellectually, I understand that it doesn't save me that much time. Even over the course of this, it might have been saving me 10 minutes. But it's a lot of unnecessary mouse movement. I want to get rid of that unnecessary mouse movement. You could write an interpreter for Visual Basic in Python and then run access code. Somebody has probably done this. Somebody has probably done this. And Anders is going back to Visual Fox Pro, which he can have Visual Fox Pro. I like data platforms where I'm allowed to have more than 4 characters for my tables.
Exactly. Why?
This is where the cool kids hang out. Yeah, we're just sitting around trashing 30, 40-year-old products. So let me talk about my IBM keyboard, because I love this thing. Visual Fox Pro Quick Forms Dev is awesome. Yeah, so for its time, Visual Fox Pro was a wonderful product. I still don't understand the strict limitations on why columns had to be so short names.
Oh, my favorite product, Visual Fox Pro. Thank you, Kevin. I love it. I love it.
One of my companies I went to work for came from Fox Pro, and it was not fun.
Yeah, that was, yeah. That's a long experience. But it's interesting that was one of the products where I almost never hear people say bad things about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yet, again, that table naming, if you want the feeling in SQL Server, just write your queries using object and column IDs. I guess you could go that route, yes. Or name all of your tables and columns in no more than 5 characters. Though at the time, I think Oracle was still limited to 8. No, it was DB2 that was limited to 8. Oracle was limited, I think, to 40. And I don't know. I'm too verbose. I can't fit what I want to say in 8 characters. Usually can't fit it in 40 either.
How about 280?
Yes, but then I'd have to go on Twitter, and Twitter is a cesspool.
I just asking.
That's not a rant.
If you need threads or not.
Not a rant, just laying it out. DB2,
That's what
this is
muted
going back.
words are for.
Sorry, Tracy, what was that?
That's what muted words are for, to make Twitter not a cesspool.
I guess then I would get no tweets, and if I got no tweets...
No, you would. Depending on what words you muted. All politics gone. It's great.
So, I mean, yeah, DB2, it's still around. I have never supported it in a prod scenario. I worked for one state agency where our sister agency was a heavy DB2 shop, and kind of avoided that part of any discussions with them. It did a job for them though, so I'll give it that. 127, good compromise, and they can be emojis. Yes, so you can have the poop emoji for tables and columns you don't like. Yes. Guess who I learned that one from? He's in the audience. Yeah, 128. Sysname is 128. So unless you're saving that extra character so that you can add the emoji at the end. All right, let's talk about ETL. Let's talk ETL best practices. This actually came from Mala. Oh, yeah, Solomon. So Solomon also is big on emoji in table and column names. Although in your case, it was more of, I think, cats and accordions, as I recall. But I could be wrong. There's a broad variety of possible emoji. Lots of fun stuff you can do with a table. And it all works. You can still query those tables. So from Mala, she wants to know about ETL best practices. And so I've written up some stuff. I know we have people in the audience who are good at ETL. Oh, Mahjong tiles, that's right. Yeah, I remember that now, Solomon. There's some good blog posts Solomon has on working with Unicode in SQL, and it's fun stuff. So, ETL best practices, knowing that there are people in the audience who know a lot about this, I am going to say some stuff. We'll see how many people agree with the stuff. This is normally how it goes. If I get 60% agreement, then I'm doing pretty well.
All you need is 51. Majority rules.
So, as far as it goes, to me, I think probably the single most important thing with ETL, got to be rerunnable. You have to be able to go through the same process again and again, because in practice, you will go through the same process again and again. If you're building out a warehouse, you'll build this ETL, this data movement from a transactional system into a warehouse. You'll build it one time, and then the warehouse people will say, well, something went wrong, so we're going to truncate the warehouse and start it all over again. So we have to be able to pick it up. We should be able to pick it back up where we left off, which means we've got to maintain some metadata. You know, we have to keep track of who's doing what are they doing, where did they do it, when did they do it. If we keep track of those things, we can find out who ran the jobs, where the current state of the jobs are, what tables got written to, how they got written to, what errors happened, what issues were experienced, what codes were returned, how many rows were written to tables, etc., etc. This is all really good information to have, especially if you want to make this auditable after the fact. You want to make sure that the data that you wrote was the data that you thought you were writing. Also, when I talk ETL, I actually have a whole point on this, that ETL and ELT are very similar, but they're different. That's my deep thought of the night. So ETL, we extract our data. We pull it out from a source system. We transform the data in memory on the machines we're working on. We load the data into the new system, like a warehouse. ETL is nice. ETL is easy to work with. ETL is a pattern that has worked for decades. And there are really good tools available to work with ETL. Same time, ELT is a thing for a reason. So we extract, we load into a new table, and then we transform the data in our destination system. So I pull data out of a source, I load it into a warehouse, and I transform in the warehouse. Maybe I land it in a staging table, and I transform into the production table. Enhanced QC says $100 says AWS has some ETL service they're selling by now. They actually have gone pretty heavily in on ELT. For example, AWS Glue. There's a horse joke in there somewhere. But AWS Glue is essentially running a Spark cluster to perform ELT, to perform data movement. But it's essentially take data, load it into a destination table, and then transform it, as opposed to transforming it in transit. The Azure example is SQL Server Integration Services is a classic ETL tool. Informatica, ETL tool. Ab initio, ETL. We perform the transformations in memory on the server, on the integration services machine. By contrast, Azure Data Factory, ELT. The Azure Data Factory machines don't tend to do very much work themselves. They take data from someplace, dump it off somewhere, and let that remote compute finish the job. Andrew says bulk copy, BCP, would be ELT. Yeah, it would be. You take a file from a location. So actually, it would be part of an ELT process. You bulk copy the data from one source, flat file from somewhere. You load it into that staging table, and maybe you have a stored procedure that performs the load, and then transformation, put it into the final table. That's an example of ELT, which says ELT didn't come around a few years ago. And also, even as I'm describing all of this, there's a lot of overlap. What's funny is that within a few years, maybe not even that long, within a few years of using SQL Server integration services, I would say that the predominant model moved away from ETL, even within SSIS. Because when you think about warehouses, what we end up with is essentially a spider model where I retrieve data from, we think of this as the top of the control flow. So we're going to go into a data flow. We're going to have retrieve data from source. We may have a couple of compute of columns, but then you go into load into destination, and then you have execute SQL task after that to do the final work. Because integration services operations, if you tried to do the pure ETL work in there, are so slow. If they're blocking tasks, you may have an enormous flow that runs out of memory or takes forever because you have a sort operation in integration services that's waiting for 32 million rows to finish up before it can move on. Yeah, about that. That happened before. It was not good. So instead, what we tended to do is pre-sort in the source, flow through as much as possible in SSIS, do as little translation as possible. Okay, you can do lookups. Lookups are fast. Lookups are non-blocking. You might be able to do some other stuff. Compute columns. Those are non-blocking. Okay, let that through. As long as it kept the spice flowing, it was good. If you had any blocking or semi-blocking components, those tended to be no-nos. No sorts. We tended not to do merge joins. We tended not to do very much in the way of joining, except by lookup. And even with lookups, generally we would cache that so that you didn't have hitting the table in the database 7 million times for your 7 million rows. So we'd pull them all into memory and do that join in memory. That's about the most transformative thing that I would do in 90% of my SSIS packages. Because generally it was figure out if this data exists in the destination. If it does, dump it off to this staging table. If it doesn't, insert directly into the destination. If there's an error, insert it into this error table. Handle metadata changes. Like all of that stuff, that was the extent of any transformation. And then there was a stored procedure afterwards that said, go check the stuff that changed and make updates. Do a bulk update so that we didn't have to update every row serially, because that was really slow. I could do bulk insert, plenty fast. Delete. Well, it's a warehouse. Don't delete data. No. Deletes, you also have to handle specially as well. But yeah, even in that pattern, a lot of the time we're still really doing ELT in our ETL tool. Anders says 90% of DBAs would fail if you asked on an interview if they have ELT experience. Maybe so. Now, in fairness, until you brought it up, I don't know that I would have thought of bulk copy as half of an ELT process. Because it's 2/3 of the ELT. It's extract and load. But yeah, I think you're right. I think DBAs tend to have a bit more experience in things. DBAs tend to have a bit more experience in things than they think they do at first. TG says 95% of SSIS packages fail way earlier in the process. Oh no, sorry. 95% of DBAs in interviews fail way earlier. Okay. That's also funny. Yeah. A lot of people, one of these days, maybe we'll have a DBA panel, like why your interviewing is not doing great panel. TG's got a great session on that. Anders has excellent stories. We know other people. Maybe I'll put together a panel one of these years. So yeah, a lot of DBAs tend not to succeed in their interviews. They fail very early with for lots of different reasons. But I don't want to spoil any of that. So I did mention errors a couple of times with ETL, and there's always a debate. Keep track of all of the errors individually or not. And the plus side is if you have a case where you need it to be auditable, I need to have a full record of everything that happened. You're going to have to store those errors. I mean, that's the way it goes. In a lot of cases, we don't tend to need that. What we tend to need is enough information to help us understand why there was a failure. So as opposed to auditing, where an external authority can look at it and understand what's happening, we as internal developers with enough core knowledge on the system can decipher what happened and understand why it happened and fix it. As a result, it becomes something that we tend to trade off a lot. We tend to say minimize the number of times when, okay, here's a clear, concise error and exactly what it means. Quite often we tend not to think through what are the ramifications of what I'm doing? What are the ramifications of this package? What can fail? How can it fail? And how can I prevent failure or mitigate failure? I definitely include myself in this. I am at least as lazy as your average developer, regardless of if that's a database developer, an application developer, or any other type. And it's this is the difficult stuff that just feels like it's holding you back. It's dragging you down. It's a lot of extra work, and if we just code it right, I don't even have to worry about these errors. And then the errors happen, and you wake up at 2 o'clock because you get paged, and you're trying to figure out what's going on, and it's PC load letter. Who knows what PC load letter even means? So that's our natural trade-off.
So, question. Would you use SSIS packages, or would you use a third-party tool for your ETLs or ELTs? Which would be your preference?
TG says neither, and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of in that boat. I guess a lot of it depends on. A lot depends on the process.
But I wanted to hear it anyways.
So if I'm just talking SQL Server to SQL Server, I would just use SQL. If it's on the same machine, I'm not going to use SSIS. If it's between two machines, I would probably rather use Polybase and set up external tables and pull data in. Alternatively, set up linked servers and pull data in. As soon as you get more complicated than essentially a one-to-one relationship, okay, now we're going to start talking about writing application code that handles that data movement. So writing .NET code or Java code if you like extra work, or whatever language of choice you have, and getting something that's gonna work a bit better. Integration
so you don't
services.
like SSIS and the change data capture stuff?
Integration services is a good place to be if you're a solo developer or on a very small team in a small shop and you just need something to move data. If you get a bit past that, you get into the idea of using BIML to develop these packages, but there are limitations to how well BIML works and what it can do. And as a result, it feels like BIML is an interesting solution to a problem, but then you grow out of the solution. And
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah, unless you have a company that is 100% bought in on BIML. In that case, then the solution works well because you buy the Verigent Studio, the BIML Studio, or the most expensive edition that has great IntelliSense, that works with analysis services, integration services, that is kept really well up to date, as opposed to the free version, which is a bit lagging behind. So you kind of hit that weird scale point where if you use the free version of BIML, you get most of the development pain and only a little bit of the ease of integration services packages, because you're kind of getting at a point where I could probably write code, maybe a bit more code. Maybe it's not quite as simple as this, but I could write straight .NET code to do a lot of this work.
Yeah. I was just trying to get you to get people, reference points for what would be the best solution when.
Yeah. And so Anders says, one place I worked at had 1,900 plus packages going into one system. That is a lot of packages. I hope that they were not all handcrafted.
We had Informatica at one place I was at, and my favorite part of it was we had GUIDs, and it changed the GUIDs to 32 character or 36. I can't remember how many characters long it is. 32 or 36 character fields instead of having unique identifiers, because Informatica couldn't recognize unique identifiers back then. It might now, but it couldn't back then.
So that
was my favorite part.
Reminds me of OBIEE, the Oracle BI Enterprise Edition, where every unique identifier was also brought in as varchar 36, and it was handled very poorly. Informatica is awesome until it isn't, and then it's horrible. Pretty much. And SSIS is the same way, except that it hits the horrible stage a bit earlier. Mala mentions that SSIS is also not easily documentable. So if you inherit something that's pretty complex, like maybe something that I created, you can spend years trying to figure out how it worked. And
I can agree there from having to take the certification exam.
Well, my answer to my packages is just read the BIML and learn that combination of XML and C#, and then everything's fine. If you can understand the conceptual.
My first year at Channel Advisor, every day I came into work and literally every day the package would fail because we were dealing with some really bad data.
Yep.
And then sitting and picking that package apart, it wasn't fun. We're past it now, but oh my gosh, those first few months were horrendous.
Oh yeah. And I mean, that's a case going back to, how are you keeping track of these errors? And the answer was, well, things were just failing, because there's the assumption that all the data coming in is good and the transformations will be good. Mm-hmm. And it gets real easy to just get into a pattern where I wrote a SQL statement. A SQL statement ran over here. I have a table over here. The columns look about the same, so we'll just match them up. And then you have to fight, and you realize, oh, well, this is 138 characters, and over here it's limited at 135 characters. Or something is combined, sorted, filtered, modified in some fashion that it's not quite what you expect it to be. Or you start reading flat files that are off by one column. stuff gets weird. By the way, TG mentions, my problem is that the performance of most of the tools is not where it needs to be. Almost none of them can support multiple network cards and scale to many concurrent streams across multiple nodes. That's another factor, yeah. And once you start getting to bigger scale, the ETL tools that were designed for 2005 machines don't really scale to 2020 problems. In fairness, I would say probably about 70 to 80% of data cases are still probably just fine in that SSIS or Informatica world. There is, however, a fair number of cases, a fair percentage of cases where there's just too much data. And then you start talking about, we need a different platform, a different solution for that. And Anders says a higher percentage than that. So would you say a higher percentage are capable or a higher percentage fail? I think he's saying a higher percentage are capable. And I don't think I would argue more than 90% SSIS is enough. Yeah, 90 I might take some quibbles with, but obviously we're all pulling numbers out from arbitrary spots.
Thin air.
Thin air is a nice way. Yes, that's a very safe way of saying it. Across all the companies that use SQL, yeah, across all of them. I know there's a huge left tail for SQL users, but among warehousing scenarios or among data movement scenarios, so not just the ones where I have a website that is hosted on a SQL database, but also where they're taking data, moving it over into some centralized platform, or they're moving data between sources. I'm not going to say 90% is wrong. My gut's saying 70 to 80, but that I could be moved up. I probably wouldn't move myself down very much. But once you hit that threshold, though, there's not that much you can do within integration services. And essentially their answer is run packages in parallel, which you have to do all of that design work yourself. There was some changes in 2016 to make that a bit easier, but I actually don't know how many companies make use of that. I've not heard of a company making use of those changes. It doesn't mean that nobody does, but I get the feeling that it probably didn't move that needle very far. And among the companies it did, they've already switched to other tooling because they needed lots of data moved. And that tooling is going to depend. If you're more in the Hadoop world, yeah, you're probably using something like Kafka to store data and Kafka streams or Spark streaming or something like that to move it around. Possibly using something like Apache Airflow to move data. In a lot of other companies, you're simply writing code to do it. You're writing optimized code to stream data from here to there and bulk inserting over on the other side, or handling it in as efficient a fashion as possible and doing just the stuff you need to do to get that data over. Because when you start talking enormous amounts of data, you're not going to do transformations. You're not going to do very much transformation inside your data movement tool. Save that for the servers where they have a lot of CPU power. They have a lot of compute, and you don't have to worry about as much in the way of network transit. So, errors. Tracy, you know all about packages. How did you handle errors when you were writing SSIS packages?
Very poorly.
That's fair. So do I.
Well,
Pragmatic
the error
Works actually had a
messages they
component.
return are just terrible. They don't really tell you anything. And then they only tell you like one error, and then there's like 20 behind it.
Yep.
So then you run it again, and then you get the 19th error, and then the 18th, and then the 17th, and then
And then at some point, you actually come back to getting the 19th error. Like, how did that happen again? Oh, something was cached.
It was just, I didn't really like packages. I didn't like it when they were DTS either. I think one of the going that far back.
One of the
The
biggest
thing with SSIS that has me really annoyed is how many different places you have to click to figure out where one thing works. And I don't know how anybody who's an experienced developer can even remember that you have to set these 20 different things for this thing to work, in this way, and you don't even know where to click to find that thing. Oh my gosh.
The only successful package I ever had that ran successful every single time was the payroll package. Now, it took everything from a D-based system, dumped it into Access, and just imported it from Access straight to SQL and just did a truncate and import data. Boom. Worked like a charm. So SQL Express had no security. Bam.
Well, simple packages are easy to write. Now that, I've learned my way around it, I don't mind writing simple packages. I enjoy
Never
them.
failed.
Yeah. The more intricate it gets, then.
As it never cared about the data. It just wiped it out and stuck new data in.
That's
my best one ever. No errors.
That's half of ELT. I'll be fair. Because at ELT you still need to do the
transformations. I didn't know transformations.
Right.
I didn't know transformations. No, not at all. That was just a load as an EL.
EL. That's the EL pattern.
But it was used in a package.
Yeah.
It did the columns in different orders, if that counts as transforming. Nah.
Not really.
I was trying to stretch it there. I just used the wizard for that one.
That works. Actually, with modern versions of SSIS, you have, as long as it's named the same, it'll automatically automap for you, which was good. I appreciated that in later versions.
That's how I named all the columns. I just named them the same. I let it import the table and name the columns themselves.
Right.
Even if it had spaces in it and all that stuff. Who cared?
I didn't have to deal with it afterwards. It's fine.
Yeah, it was just for the whole company to use, to apply for benefits. See their benefits.
I'm sure nothing bad happened.
Yeah, what surprised me is we get audited by security. Nobody ever audited that system. Like, it literally had people's salaries in it and like no security. Like, not good security anyway.
Everyone had the SA password.
No, not everyone. But it's just it should have been encrypted.
Okay.
And it shouldn't have been on SQL Express. The backup should have been encrypted.
Roughly when was it?
It was on SQL Express 2008.
Okay, so probably in the 2010 timeframe.
But originally they put it in Access, and then they released it to test it against 40 people and realized the solution would not work with the program running against Access. So they came to me and needed it in SQL by the next morning because they were releasing the product the next morning. So,
gotcha. All right, that makes sense.
And they wouldn't let me put it on the existing instance, which would have made more sense because it was this big.
That makes sense.
So I loaded their application server with the SQL Express and zoom.
Yeah. Now, with an Express, you couldn't really encrypt much of any.
Yeah, you couldn't do much. You don't even have an agent. So you had to, find workarounds to run backups and stuff.
Scheduled tasks. Running batch scripts that are VBS.
Yeah.
That call SQL Server and run the backup.
Bring back horrible memories. I had to do that for the whole environment. They took all my jobs out of SQL Agent. and put them in batch files.
Huh.
It made me delete my good backups before the other ones were taken.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, that cost me 9 hours one time.
Why do we? Our data is only 20 gigabytes. Why do we have more than 10 gigabytes of backups? That's just wasted space.
Well, they wanted to only have 200 gigabytes for like all of the systems at the plant. And we exceeded that. So it's like, well, just delete the backups you got there first. I was like, no, you can't do that. Because then if you take a backup and it's not there, well, just do it. And I refused to do it for 6 months. And then I finally had to do it or our backups would fail. And then 6 months later, a corrupt database couldn't be backed up. And guess what? It already deleted the good backup. So we had to wait for tapes to come in and people to figure out how to restore stuff off the tape. We only waited 23 seconds for me to run the restore, though.
Better than asking you in the morning to have it ready in 10 minutes. At least you had overnight to do it.
And my phone got washed in the washer machine that morning and everything. It was a bad day.
That sounds like a bad day. Andrew says, back in my day, paper copy of the entered data was all the backup we needed. Pepperidge Farms remembers, Anders. Pepperidge Farms. TG says, wait until someone suggests taking only dedupe snapshots as backups. So, Tracy, you have a story.
Been there, done that.
So, how long was it before the first backup failure caused a problem where you couldn't restore?
It was within 6 months.
Within 6 months. That sounds about right. What do you mean? We've got these great backups.
Yeah. Off-site. Have to wake someone up in the middle of the night. Have to get permission to go get someone to wake them up. Your boss is out of town, so you have to call the director. You have to explain to the director that the database is corrupt. You hang up the phone with everybody on the conference call. She calls you back and has you explain how the database is corrupt, how you really know the database is corrupt. So you run CheckDB, it errors out.
Anyone dealt with Tivoli tape backups?
Yes, they were tapes.
Fun times.
Now,
And then when they brought them in, they couldn't figure out how to mount the tape to get to the backup. It was only 0.75 gigabyte file.
We had one situation where I worked where the tape would, it was a revolving, rotating backup. So every 4 days it would go and rewrite the first one. And if something was corrupt or missed, it would go and move on to the next one. Something like that. I don't remember all the details. So actually, I think after a good amount of time, they figured that it was actually backing up for 3 days while their committed thing to the management was that it would keep it for 4 days. And when we did a DR exam and we went there on site with the CIO and all the big shots, they found out that they had only 3 days worth of backups. It was fun.
That's when you find out, oh, we had an error on Friday, but it's okay. We've got 4 days of backups. And, it was a holiday Monday, but now it's Tuesday and we're, Enhanced QC says, don't dog on DTL. Tapes are where it's at. I've seen so many people be able to tell the Nigerian princes to go pound sand and mine his own Bitcoin because they had off-site tapes. Off-site tapes are good. Now, at the extreme, I would say, if you get cheap enough disk, you might be able to store that disk longer. There are cases where storing it in cloud providers like, say Glacier or in AWS or in Azure, the lowest, coldest tier, slowest disk, where that can be cheaper than running on tape. If you don't pull that data back very often, it can be cheaper. As soon as you pull stuff back, it starts getting expensive. but if it's just there for emergency, it can be cheaper. It can also be faster. So that said, tape has been a solution for a reason. It's been there for a while.
You just need people that actually know how to restore it off of the tape, though. Because
True.
we didn't have people that could actually, it took them 6 hours to mount the tape and get a 0.75 gigabyte file off the tape.
Oh, the tape
6
admins.
hours.
We call them
After
tape
the tape
admins.
got there, they couldn't get the file
That was
mounted and loaded.
the full-time job was that. The guys who managed that Tivoli thing.
Right.
Their only job was to manage backups.
No,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
didn't have it like that. We just had this one person that was supposed to do that when we had a DR scenario or something actually happened. So you didn't have any practice at doing it until something bad happened. And then when something bad happened, you see how long it takes.
Right, which is the worst time to learn. Because now you have levels of management standing over your shoulders. So my experience with DLT is that about 20% of tapes have errors. So good luck when you have a database that spans more than 5 tapes. Anders got backup admins to get 8-year-old backup restored. Enhanced QC says, seen longer coming from tape, pulled some quality data that was over 10 years old. Yeah, tape's pretty stable. You know, it'll last a while. You don't override it over and over and over and over and over.
That's what
The
we did to
lawyers
ours.
flipped
though, is
out
write
that
it
we
over and
had-
over and over.
What's that?
That's what we did to ours, though, is write it over and over and over and over and over and rotate them out. So.
Never actually try to read them. Like, I'm thinking VCR cassettes that you've written 5, 6, 7, 8 times where you start seeing the blurring between 2 shows that overlapped. Let's see. There were some people who were Tivoli admins, Mala mentioned, and lawyers flipped out when we had that old of tapes. We had to start making our own clandestine storage. Yeah, that's one of those rules where, yes, we guarantee we get rid of all data after 7 years. So my state job had interesting rules where it's like, this data you must keep for exactly 7 years and destroy it after that point. This data you must keep for at least 7 years. This data you may keep for no more than this many years. The Department of Health had a rule that it was 99 years after a person dies, then you must destroy the records for them. So, a lot of different rules, and you end up, I don't know, you sometimes end up running into a case where, yeah, we totally got rid of that old data. Don't worry about it. Over 7 years, Glacier is cheaper as long as you don't need it back. Yeah. Once you start pulling it back, then it gets expensive. It is, however, generally faster. Knowing which tape to pull from Iron Mountain is always the hard part.
That's where we sent our tapes, to Iron Mountain.
Yeah, Iron Mountain's very popular for that.
That's where everybody sends them.
Pretty much, yeah. One government agency I did a contract for could store that data for 1 hour unless flagged.
So I like this. My favorite story with the backups was with the private cloud hosting company where I worked a long time ago. That hosting company, by the way, was where SQL Pass had their servers back in the days. That is 7 or 8 years ago. I don't think they're with them anymore, but back then it was like that. That company had a policy that a customer who did not pay their dues, the backup would be dropped, the database and the backup would be dropped 2 days or 3 days, I don't remember how long after the payment did not come through. That's how long they kept it. So if your credit card lapsed or you had some kind of issue with making a payment on time,
Right?
both your database and the backups are gone.
Oof.
Because they had limited amount of space or something. I don't remember all the details. Something like that. So you would have these tragedies of people who literally went under because everything was lost because they forgot that their credit card is expiring.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yep.
That just sounds like, hey, maybe we need a policy to have an off-site backup for that kind of thing. I don't know.
But
And-
private hosting in those days, it was a very profitable business,
Right.
especially catering to small businesses, and they did whatever they wanted to do. They had no ethics or nothing around that.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap up tonight with so there's no Mala's Books and More kiosk. Ooh, TG says, in Europe, my first question for backup retention SLA for the CEO and CFO was always which countries they prefer to go to jail in. Country 1, you need to delete after 7 years, versus country 2, you need to keep for at least 8 years. Pick the prison. Seems that's a good question. There's again, I'm gonna go back to Office Space. Conjugal visits? I don't know. So as we wrap up, no Mala's Books and More kiosk. So instead, I'm going to point out that I got in my copy just today. Itzik Ben-Ghan's T-SQL Window Functions, 2nd edition. I have not read it. I have read the 1st edition. I'm actually looking forward to seeing how this differs from the 1st edition.
So since you said displayed an unread book, Kevin, I'm going to do the same here.
Look,
I
Mala's alive.
book. I got this book that I plan to read over the holidays. This book is about the history of PowerShell, written by one of its original creators, Don Jones, who's also an excellent writer. It's called Shell of an Idea. It was available on his website. I don't know if it's on Amazon yet, but it wasn't 2 weeks ago. And it's a really nice book. I just started reading it. And anybody who's a PowerShell buff, I think you might find it an interesting read.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this, and I put in a link to Don's website, and it said that it would be out on Amazon. Oh, look at that. It is actually on Kindle Unlimited. So if you are a Kindle Unlimited user, you can get a copy of the ebook. You can rent it for free. There's the link for that. Otherwise, it's $35 paperback. Go. So with this, we're going to wrap it up for the evening. I'm going to go watch a football game, and we'll see you again. Now, tomorrow, Tracy was able to get a person who hadn't been able to, we had him on the schedule for a while, but issues around travel and everything. Samir Bahara will be talking about designing data-intensive cloud-native applications tomorrow night for the Advanced DBA group.
He is a very good speaker. Highly recommended.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Next Tuesday, Jess Schultz is going to talk about Azure container instances and basically finding a way to convert database backups into backpacks so that you can load them into Azure SQL Database. So that's coming up next Tuesday. Tomorrow is Samir. And there will probably be Shop Talk again next Monday. Got to double check on that timing because it's going to be a busy week for me. So with that, everybody, have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.